Hi everyone, welcome back to episode 7, I think this is, of The Power of Dialogue. I once again forgot to update the episode title. Unfortunately, we do not have George again today, but I am joined by Ryan and Tom. We haven't got a specific topic for this week, we just kind of thought we'd catch up on a few things that's been going on in relation to COVID-19, and maybe a bit of speculation about where that will be taking us in the future as well. So, right off the bat, shall we talk about some testing? Because that's the wrong screen. There you go. Because testing has been quite a big thing lately. I think we can all say it's definitely been prominent in a lot of the news. We did manage to reach the 100,000 tests in one day. But then it has seemed to have mysteriously dropped after that, so there may have been some creative accounting on their part. And now that's an even higher target of 200,000. However, this will be including the antibody tests, I believe.
Yeah, I think the drop off is interesting. I think this morning in PMQs, Boris Johnson explained that the reason for that was that supply was exceeding demand. But if supply is exceeding demand, I can only really think that demand will begin to reduce as the cases reduce, and so there would then be not much logic in ramping up the targets to 200,000 or whatever the new target was. So I think there's definitely been some, kind of creativity in the whole sort of messaging and communication side of this testing thing.
Yeah, I think that it's one of those things. Once again, that we aren't getting clear figures exactly on how they're doing these things, and I don't think we've ever had them actually verified by a third party in any way, which
Right.
you think would be pretty easy to do.
They published a breakdown of those tests, which is where more suspicion came from, because I think it was something like 40,000 of them were tests to be carried out at home, but they weren't that those tests had been received back and had been tested, simply that they had sent them and they weren't their problem anymore. Which is, that they left the government central testing system to be sent to universities, hospitals, and some straight to people's homes to be further distributed. And they just simply, on one day, on what happened to be the last day of the testing target, simply ticked off 40,000 tests. There were 40,000 physical tests, but it's not known when those will be completed or if they will be completed in a single day.
Yeah.
Which they weren't.
I think as well, because they seem to be doing rather weird. It's not a 24-hour period, I don't think. I think it's something different. Because they keep going until 9 p.m. this day. 9 a.m. this day, I think. And then...
Yeah, it's 9 a.m. the day that they announced last day's tests.
Because, which feels like a weird timings to me. But anyway. But then, we are seeing the cases drop as well, and if we are still having more tests than we were having, so it is also looking promising that, as Johnson has officially said, we are past peak, and I think we can see that in almost every graph that there is currently. I actually did a reverse image search for one of the graphs the other day, and it came actually it has a very similar shape to Apple's stock.
Interesting.
Which I found slightly amusing. But maybe Google isn't quite as powerful as we think it is. But I think that it's definitely interesting that it is quite getting onto a more of a normal curve in both senses of the word, in both the distribution and I've lost my train of thought. In both distribution and it is quite a common curve as well.
Right.
In that as well, I think that we weren't even at the peak for very long, from what I've been looking at, which is a good sign as well, because it means that then there wasn't one time we had a lot of demand in hospitals.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
true.
One thing, this
I
isn't
think
quite
the
on. Oh, yes, Tom.
that's right. You continue.
No, I was changing the topic slightly, so you go.
Okay, that's right. So you mentioned the issue with hospitals and the demand in hospitals, and I think that is another kind of area where I don't know, maybe it's cynical to suggest that the Nightingales were sort of set up to be as much publicity as anything else. But I think I've seen that with 50% capacity in intensive care in our normal hospitals, never mind with all the extra capacity that we've got with the Nightingales. So if we're 50% capacity in the hospitals we have got, then why have we been spending all the time and resources trying to set up these other hospitals when we should have been spending time and resources on getting out PPE and testing and so on?
I
Yeah.
think one possible reason is that the number of people attending hospitals because of strokes has decreased massively. The number of strokes and coronavirus have no link. The number of strokes should remain consistent. It's people having symptoms of a stroke and choosing not to go to A&E, where they will get the care they need. If you have a stroke, you need to call 999. It is an emergency.
Yeah.
So perhaps on forecasted A&E demand, they would go in some areas, could go over capacity, but instead people are deciding that are making their own mind up of what's an emergency, like they never have done before, instead of staying at home and suffering.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think it's one of those
Definitely a big
things,
factor.
though. I think it's one of those things, though. The government, I think, is damned if they do and damned if they don't.
yeah,
True.
If they hadn't done the Nightingale hospitals, and so we have everyone was going, we don't have the capacity, we need to make sure the NHS isn't overwhelmed, we need to have all these beds. So they went, okay, we're going to make sure we have a surplus of beds that, and then now that those beds aren't being used, people are going, well, why did you do that? I'm like, but you asked us to do that.
Yeah.
I think that it's very difficult on the government's part, actually, to please anyone at this point. I think there's a lot of hostility towards any actions that they're taking. People are trying to actively trip them up.
I think that's definitely a fair point.
Gotcha. Why did you do that and waste all these resources? But that's because they want us to have a surplus.
The data they made those decisions on was coming out of Italy, where people were being treated in aisles of hospitals and corridors because they didn't have the proper number of beds.
Yeah.
So
I think we have more beds normally than Italy anyway, as well. I'm pretty sure we do have a better hospital capacity system than I'm pretty sure maybe in the entirety of Europe.
You would have thought so.
Because I think we have something like the second best healthcare system, or something along those lines.
Right.
For capacity and things like that. I might have that figure wrong. I think Ryan's checking it currently.
I'm checking, ICU beds per capita. Where are we on the... We're 6.6 ICU/CCB beds per 100,000 inhabitants, which, there are... Germany has 33.9.
Wow.
That sounds about right, actually. And Germany's actually doing pretty well in their numbers, though I think there may be a bit of creative accounting in there again. I think this is the tricky thing with everything being carried out by by each government. There's not kind of almost a UN. I can imagine a UN committee of testing.
To standardise it.
All the information gets sent to them, and then they can announce. Or the WHO, World Health Organization, could be the other option, though they've kind of gone down a lot in people's estimations recently.
Yeah, that's true. I think it will be interesting afterwards when this is finished and when we can look at some more standardised measurements. I think the UK are hoping to use the difference in the amount of the extra amount of deaths in terms of raw numbers compared to what there usually is. And so I think when we can start to compare those numbers after this, it'll be easy to make the comparisons. But yeah, I think the communication side of things and the spin and the way sort of governments are having to kind of cover their back which then means that things are confusing. There's a lack of clarity, and it's difficult to establish exactly what is happening.
Yeah, definitely. Um, I think that testing is one of those points as well where it's going to be hard to because there are now going to be different types of tests. Now the antibody tests are coming in. There was already confusion about them beforehand. I think now it's going to get even more confusing when they say we carried out X number of tests, but we're going to have to look at those proportions as well.
Right.
Is it going to be 50-50? Is it going to be actually we're doing far more antibody tests than antigen tests? Which I find more likely, and I'd actually find more reassuring. No, I think the more people we have with who have come through with positive antibody tests, the better. Because then at least they have some degree of immunity for a potentially limited amount of time, but enough for us to actually take effect of to actually send people back to work and kind of keep this contained.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that next kind of stage of testing happens in a way, because I think it's probably going to be quite a fundamental part of the sort of process of coming out of lockdown.
Yeah, definitely. Ryan, do you have anything to add?
No, I think all the countries the governments are the one big headline figure. They'll choose whatever headline figure they're doing best in. That's the natural. Yeah. But as long as they publish all of the data at the end, in the future we will be able to produce very nice, fancy graphs that are proper with reliable data. At the moment, it's still rubbish. All the graphs are very. They could be anywhere from here to here. Who knows?
Yeah. I think it is. I think I've mentioned the episode before about the Office for National Statistics are doing a really great job, in my opinion. They are updating daily the spreadsheets, and you can actually see for all the COVID deaths with quite nice breakdowns as well by age group. By I think there's.
Has Stephen frozen?
I think he has. Yeah, the fact. Oh, is someone coming back?
I'm back.
There we go.
Yes.
There we go.
Cool.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
I'm not quite sure what happened then, because of course I've got the streaming computer up here as well, and I could see myself frozen and you guys moving. I didn't even know what was happening.
I think it's done it again. We're back.
Is that better?
There we go.
Yeah. Right.
Cool.
Where was I?
Where were you?
I can't remember. I think that obviously the computer gods are saying that we should move on to the next topic.
Oh,
We've talked about
it was
this
the Office for National Statistics. That's what it was. Yeah.
Doing a really good job, and if anyone's doubting the numbers and wants to look for themselves, really good place to go. I've been downloading spreadsheets quite often actually, just to have a look. Yes, that is probably one of the nerdiest things someone can do, but I find it interesting. Kind of going on to kind of our next topic, which I think would be quite interesting to talk about, is where we're standing in relation to Europe and then the rest of the world in our testing and in our just our methods of looking at coronavirus and how we're dealing with it. As I was saying before the call, I can't remember. I think it was Spain has a size about 150% of ours, so I think they're our size plus a bit more. That's about another half, at least. And they also have 6 million fewer people in their population overall. So I think that it's very interesting to then note that that's one of the reasons that we're actually seeing higher deaths, because we are more densely populated than a lot of these other countries that we're looking at and kind of comparing ourselves to. For instance, Germany, I believe, actually isn't very densely populated in a lot of areas, and that may be a reason they're actually doing well with this.
Yeah, I think the population density is is an interesting one. I think the media started to.
I think we might have lost Tom.
The media has started to just take absolute figures without accounting for regional and demographic, the background for those figures that would make them more sensible comparisons.
Yeah.
Did you hear any of what I just summarised you as what you might have said, Tom?
Sorry about that. No, my thing just kind of crashed for some reason, but I'm back. No, I missed everything you just said.
Well, go and say what you were about to say and see if it's what I just said.
Okay, so I think basically what I was getting to was that the government at the beginning of this were comparing massively between sort of countries and kind of pointing out how bad Italy was. And then all of a sudden we're walking that back as the media has kind of started to pass out the message that, yeah, we can't make international comparisons. And as the government has also started to peddle that as our kind of death count has increased.
Yeah.
Is that what you were going along the lines of?
Yeah, the same thing, but for different reasons. I was saying for statistical reasons. You're saying because the government's walking it back because it makes them look bad, but it does.
Kind of.
Yeah. I think, and then of course we've got the abnormality in many regards of America. But I think it is interesting that such a high proportion of their deaths is in one city. Or being New York. There's a huge amount in New York. And then actually, under a lot of the different states, there's actually a very small number of cases.
Right.
I saw quite an interesting graph, I don't know if I'll be able to find it again, which had density per state of coronavirus. And you had like a few large ones of, New York, I think Georgia was another large one, a place like that. But most of the states actually had a really small amount of cases. Which, when you think about, the states are I don't know, some states are the size of almost a small country a lot of the time. The US is a massive place, so it's no surprise that they actually overtook China in cases, considering just the sheer size.
Yeah, and the connectivity and everything comes in and out of the US. Although also China, I guess, in terms of goods, but less so with people.
Yeah. Mind you, China was very good at keeping it very much in a contained area, which is something China very good at, is containing many different things.
Yeah.
Accurate statistics being one of them.
That is true, yeah.
Human rights being the other.
So I think there's a few different places, kind of things with that as well, and kind of the comparisons can't be made in the same way. Have I frozen again, or can you guys hear me?
I can still see you.
Okay, sorry. I'm also watching the streaming computer now. I'm having issues as well, and I froze completely during that. So.
Oh. No, it's good my end.
Okay, that's good to know then. So yeah, I think that everyone's now saying we can't make these comparisons, and yet so many people still are as well. Because we're so used to going, oh, this is what X did, this is what Y did.
Yeah. I think especially because we haven't got a comparable disease so we can't compare things historically. It's not like, oh, did we do better than last time? The only way of us sort of establishing how good we are dealing with this kind of crisis is relative to other countries. So I think it's kind of only natural in a way to try to kind of compare it to what's happening in the rest of the world. But yeah, as we've kind of gone over, it is easier said than done.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of comparing to past diseases, you put coronavirus on the same graph as SARS, MERS, or other novel coronaviruses in the last couple of decades. Coronavirus is up here, and those are just a flat line along the bottom. You put coronavirus on the same graph as the Black Death, the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. Coronavirus is on the floor, and the pandemics that killed a third of the world's population are up there. So there's nothing of about the same similarity. They're all either minuscule or much,
Yeah.
much worse.
I think one interesting kind of thing with the historical element of it is the way that has kind of shaped the different responses, or at least the speed with which people have reacted to it. I think it was Paul Collier, the poverty kind of academic guy from Oxford, who was saying that there's three kind of different world regions who have responded to it in very different ways: Europe, Asia, and Africa. And in Europe, we've been really kind of slow to respond to it because our last major pandemic was kind of 1918, as you say, and that's kind of out of living memory. Whereas in Asia, you've got SARS, which, whilst it didn't have anywhere near the level of impact that this has had, it was still kind of a major thing, and it's in recent memory. And so they were sort of, once they spotted the coronavirus, they were able to see what it was sooner than maybe Europeans, who were just kind of saying, oh, it's just a flu, it's not a serious thing. And then I think similar to Asia, you can then look at Africa, and they have Ebola, so which again was kind of massively negatively sort of impacted the country, and they were able to spot coronavirus much quickly, and were able to sort of make the necessary kind of decisions earlier than Europe might have done because they have recent memory of it. But then what kind of, I think, sort of crosses all of that out is that you might have learned loads of lessons from Ebola, but if you've only got 4 ventilators in the whole of your country, then you're kind of screwed whatever lessons you've learned. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in Africa.
Yeah. Just on the ventilators there as well, I found it really interesting that Dyson created some ventilators and designed them.
Yeah.
The UK have now turned them down because we have too many.
Wow.
So the R&D, I think they spent something like, I think it was something like 4 million or something. No, it's more than that, but like it was
20 million was the figure.
They did 20 million on the R&D for this thing, and then we just completely rejected it. The UK did. I think other places are taking it now.
Okay.
But, if you just can't think about the fast growth that there was for ventilators.
Yeah.
And then think how many ventilators we now have in the Nightingale hospitals.
Yeah.
There's one per bed there or something, isn't there?
Possibly.
So, there's so many just in those hospitals that are just, sitting there. Which is a good thing and a bad thing, because then that means those countries who are worse hit, they're not going to be getting the ventilators that they might need, but we've then got a surplus of them. Almost the opposite with PPE. Other countries have a lot of PPE. We are still on the cusp of struggling with PPE, though I haven't heard much about it recently.
I think this in some ways is kind of where the international cooperation side of things has not been up to scratch, because when you have got such differences in who has surpluses of what, who's got deficits of the other, that is the perfect place for an international organisation to come and kind of share things around. But I think part of the problem, kind of as I think you're kind of saying at the end there, is in some ways it's hard to identify how much of what we need. And because countries are at different places in the cycle of the virus, it could be difficult to share out equally because of the way in which we're kind of needing different amounts of stuff at different times. But I think on the PPE, I think in PMQs, I think Keir Starmer was making the point that we need to massively kind of up the PPE side of things as we come out of lockdown, and normal people will start to need PPE just to be able to go to work, at least for the next few months as things slowly unravel.
Yeah. Man, it's going to be interesting to see what PPE they then advise for that. Whether they advise gloves, like whether they just advise gloves and tell people to wear face masks, or whether it's all advisory, or whether you need to have the waterproof, water repelling gowns as well as the gloves as well as the face masks. Obviously, that's an extreme, but.
We'll be going around this, like, I don't know, going around Argos looking like stormtroopers or something.
Yeah. Entertaining as that might be, I'm not sure the government will be putting that one forward.
Yeah.
Other generic armies are available. We're not sponsored. Yeah. So I think on the world scale, it's actually quite small, I think, relatively speaking, on the world scale of deaths as a proportion. But it's then obviously thanks to the media and the internet, it's a lot more widespread and known about probably than those were at the time.
Do you mean
interesting? Sorry, what was that?
No, I was just going to say. So, do you mean that in terms of deaths, this is quite low, relatively speaking? Okay. I think that, I think that's probably an interesting kind of perspective, and the media has kind of made it much more front and center. I think the other element is because we are more interconnected than we ever have been. The knock-on effect on the economy and so on is probably going to be more than most other diseases in history. Maybe, I'm not sure. We'll wait and see. But I think that has been disproportionately negatively affected relative to other diseases.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just checking quick. Yeah, so there's been 257,000 deaths worldwide from the coronavirus currently.
Right.
I want to say that that's fewer people than died in the trenches during World War One in one battle, in one of the battles. I'm just going to check that.
It would be the Somme if you're looking for the battle, but
yeah, I'm not sure.
I know for a fact 400,000 people die annually of malaria, and in some positive news, I think scientists have come up with a possible way of infecting mosquitoes so that they're no longer infectious, which
that's good.
Seems to be 100% effective if rolled out, which means the end for malaria. They're currently working out on how to roll it out. But...
yeah. Okay, so through the entire Battle of the Somme, 300,000 people died.
Right.
So, so in the grand scheme of things, that's not... Obviously, every death is a tragedy. But, what I'll kind of do is I'm kind of compare it on scales to things that also aren't the same as this. So we can kind of put it in perspective a bit more as well.
I think the total number of deaths in World War One I'm looking at is between 15 and 19 million overall. So that is quite a difference.
And we seem, I think the other note is we seem to recover economically from that, even though it did take a while.
And World War Two even more so. The boom after that was massive.
Yeah. So I think that also, is also a message of hope in that as well. We've been hit very bad by in the economy before, and we have different measures. We were able to have people still working, but a lot of the workforce then wasn't able to work because they were fighting. So, I think we are starting to almost get into more slightly similar. Thinking about it, we've already had the analogy of it being like a war, or an invisible mugger, as Johnson likes to call it.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting where kind of just on the world scale where that is. So there's kind of something else that I kind of wanted to definitely talk about, and then we've got talking about the potential easing that could come soon of lockdown, and then maybe extrapolating from other countries where that's going. But the tracking app that the government are currently testing on the Isle of Wight is the Isle of Wight.
I think so. Yeah.
I apparently got that wrong for a second then, but no, I think it's interesting that we are one of the only countries not going through the decentralized system that is currently being developed and used in other countries.
I think France is. Well, we're not alone. There are a couple.
We're not alone, definitely, but I think the majority of places who are thinking of doing similar things are using the decentralized system, which, from a computer science standpoint, I actually prefer as well. I think it's a lot harder. I think that so the main two players in it are Apple and Google. and they're actually saying they're going to start baking it into the firmware and the OS of their devices.
Can
So-
you outline what centralized and decentralized is
Yes,
for our audience who aren't computer science students?
So a centralized system is where you have a phone, and it collects all your data, and then it sends it off to a central server, and it's all worked out there who you came into contact with, and then it's the job of the centralized server to then deal with that. And that's what the UK government are currently trialing.
Right.
What the Google and Apple system is you have the software on your phone. You have the app on your phone, and what that will do is it will once again detect those around you, based on many different things like location data and things like that. Which it's important to note that Google and Apple both collect a lot of already. We can already see that when they were doing hotspot maps at the beginning of lockdown. And what that means is then so it's decentralized, because that then stays with your phone. It's then up to your kind of the individual in that regard. Obviously, you don't have to do anything, but it's not some kind of central power that's kind of organizing it all. Everything's then run from that person's phone, in the simplest sense. Which then I kind of prefer as well, because I think that's more secure. There's far less data traffic. It's going to be easier on phone batteries as well, because it's not an external app that has to run other things. It's baked in. I think so, and also it doesn't use Bluetooth in the same way as the UK government one does. The UK
I'm
government are
pretty-
using Bluetooth.
Google and Apple are definitely using Bluetooth. in their solution.
They're using other features as well. It's not wholly reliant on the Bluetooth.
What are the other features if it's peer-to-peer? How else do they communicate though?
So what it does is that each person has has a rough kind of idea of where everyone is, but then it will still keep it so you don't send any data off in the same regard. It's
Yeah.
who you come into contact with at that time, then your phone handles it, rather than having a central system going.
But
thinking
you
it back.
exchange the keys
Yeah.
with the other people via Bluetooth.
Yeah, I think there are some things that are done by Bluetooth. Here, I'm just checking the app.
But then just kind of play devil's advocate with Stephen. Isn't it right if all of that, if you can use the data of when and where people have been come into contact with other people to help not on an individual level, but on a society level, to help scientists judge how coronavirus is spreading, how to reduce transmission, are there particular hotspots around the country?
But then it's important to note that these companies are already doing that. As I mentioned before, there are hotspot apps through Google and Apple. They're providing maps where people are visiting more frequently and things like that. And so places to avoid in that regard. So the point is that they already have a lot of this data, rather than adding a third then centralized party who everyone's sending data towards.
Isn't the government the centralised body in the UK, that because the Google published on a county level some English county level some graphs of usage and stuff, but you can get more granular than county level. East Devon is huge.
Yeah.
But I think it was district council level, but yeah.
Yeah, I think so. It doesn't work off Bluetooth. It works off I think it works off the actual antenna in the phone. From what I find, it kind of has a.
I'm on apple.com, and for privacy preserving
Google.
contract tracing, there's Bluetooth specification. They're interoperable. It definitely uses Bluetooth.
Yeah, I'm not saying. I also didn't say it didn't. I'm saying that it's not the only reliance that they're using, as well. But it's not that wholly reliant, and I think I would rather stop adding these extra and actually targets that that hackers can now have as well. They can. You'd be surprised how quickly, when a group of hackers get together, that they could actually probably breach the government system. While it's a lot harder because because you'd have to download that app, which then means you can get access to the code of it. Which then means that, which you can't do as easily if it's actually baked into the firmware of the phone.
Can
Right.
you not get access to the firmware of the phone? Isn't that what people who
It's
jailbreak
possible,
their
but
phones
it's not-
do?
it's a lot harder to do it, and it will get out there a lot slower than it will for a normal app you have to download. But I'm also not the only person I've spoken to who's saying the same things as I am as well. I've spoken to quite a few different computer scientists as well, who are not a fan of the way that the UK government is doing it.
And that must be because they think the Israeli approach is much better. Why go to the private sector and ask them to develop some complicated solution when you can go to the secret services and ask them to do it via phone towers? I don't know whether it's working yet, but that's their intended solution, which, yeah, if it works, it will be fantastic. I'm sure there's huge privacy problems involved, but who cares about that?
Yeah, who cares about people's privacy?
Yeah.
I think that's what China kind of, goes too much overboard on the other way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I kind of want to kind of have a quick word about that because that is actually in the news a lot lately. Now it's starting to be trialed, and it may work a lot better. I believe they say it has 80% uptake currently on the Isle of Wight, which, and it needed 50% to be valid.
It was
quite a
only
lot.
being rolled out for healthcare workers and council workers. General public on Isle of Wight were getting it tomorrow.
Yeah,
So-
I was talking about 80% uptake through those people.
But you
Currently.
would expect a higher uptake from those people, considering they're
Yeah.
going to know more about the pandemic working in
I
either
think
local
also,
government or
I
healthcare.
think it was possible to also to pre-sign up to it. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I'm pretty sure there was an option to kind of have it to pre-sign up, so loads of people can then get it quicker as well. So I think that the 80% does include that, and as I said, it only needed 50% to be a proper study, to be counted as an accurate representation of how it will work in the wider population.
Yeah.
Do you know how it will practically work? In that, does if you near someone who has, or so if someone has had coronavirus, does their app kind of ping, and anyone who goes near that then gets a notification to say you've been near someone with the coronavirus, or how kind of practically does it work? Do you know?
So to my knowledge, the best of my knowledge, I might be slightly wrong in this, so I don't want to, don't take what I'm saying as gospel truth.
Sure.
But what I believe is happening is it will actually keep a track of everyone that you've been to in the who you've come into contact with since the start of a possible infection period where you actually were contagious.
Oh, okay. So
Because
once
it
you've
tracks
if
in the
you've got
past,
it,
and so it will then anyone you've come into contact with in that past time, once you register that you have symptoms on the app,
yeah.
it will alert all of them.
Oh, so it helps you
Then,
contact
so you
tracing.
go out and come into contact with people. It then alerts any of those people as of until you're then out of the woods, not infectious. And then what will actually happen is then if you come into contact with someone who has it, I think it will probably still alert you, even though you can then go, oh, it's fine, I've had it.
Oh, that makes
So
sense.
still
Okay.
self-isolate. I believe it's still government advice.
It'll
even
be
if that
interesting
is-
to see how that works and whether it does kind of make a
I think we lost Tom slightly there, I'm afraid.
I'm sure he'll be back. My interesting is whether the number of people will install it that the government hopes so. Out of people who have phones, who have new phones, who have the technology to do it, will people install it?
I mean, I know people who say they're going to just leave their phone at home and carry around like a Nokia brick. Other bricks are available.
But why? Well, no, like
because they are distrustful of authority. But I think there's if you think about how many people there are spreading conspiracy theories about COVID-19, chances
Yeah.
are most of them won't download it. So then they'll probably find ways to bypass it. So, yeah, I think it is fair to say that there are a lot of people who won't.
which problem with humans and making stuff voluntary. What were you going to say, Tom?
Nothing interesting. No, I think I'd finished what I was saying before the Skype thing crashed. I don't know why it keeps doing that.
I think the tech gods are not particularly happy with us today.
I
Yeah.
think that's it. Yeah.
Just shout out to one person, to our one very frequent commenter, who says, please
Ah.
pick a political party in the future. We have his vote.
Say that again.
Is that he now wants us to form a political party, and we will have his vote for definite.
Oh, fantastic! Nice.
So
Sounds good.
maybe that's a better thing we should do at some point, is working out what all our policies would be. As
That
a
could
bit
be
of fun.
interesting.
Maybe a celebration post COVID-19. How are we going to change the world? Yeah. So, shall we just get on to kind of in our last kind of 20 minutes or so? Shall we talk about how lockdown potentially will be eased probably based on data coming back from this app, the testing data that we were talking about earlier, and just what we're seeing deaths-wise.
Sounds good. Yeah. I'm not sure. I think it's going to be a really, really long and slow process. I think at the beginning of this, I was thinking, by the end of the year, things will be back to normal, schools, universities, and all the rest of it. But I can't see anything being back to normal for, I don't know, possibly a year from now even. I think it's going to be a long, slow thing, and I think it will be impossible for us to nail it right on first time. I don't think that necessarily means there'll be a second peak, but I don't think there will be a smooth decline necessarily.
I mean, I think it's important to note that Ireland have released their strategy, their 5-point plan.
Right.
Which I have up on my phone currently. So phase 1, which they're hoping to begin on the 18th of May, so very soon. And that's up to 4 people from different households will be allowed to meet outside. Stationary IT equipment stores, garden centres and hardware shops can reopen.
Right.
So that's the smaller ones. The larger scale ones have been allowed to reopen previously anyway. They were never asked to shut down.
Okay.
And then school and colleges will be open for teachers only, allowing them to start planning lessons.
Interesting. I would have thought that's one of the tasks which is easiest to do at home, but
I suppose then they
it's
congregate together easier, maybe.
possibly.
And then start looking at maybe, because they do want. I know the UK are thinking of bringing back year 6, 10, and 12 first.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons for that is so then they can actually have smaller classes because they have more teachers from the other years then.
That could be pretty good if you've got like really small classes and you've got your own teacher to like 3 or 4 kids in a whole classroom or something. Like private tuition for a few months.
Yeah, but you'll end up with a PE teacher who's trying to teach you English.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
That's not a private tutor there.
So that's kind of what they're then planning. So what I wouldn't be surprised is then they're trying to figure out how to divvy it all up, and that was why they're allowing teachers back.
Right.
But then it seems
yes.
Ireland, like their first stage, is returning quite a lot of the measures, are returning things like to how they've always been here in the UK, because Ireland shut all schools for healthcare workers, children. No one is at school in Ireland. We have our very flimsy enforced things on exercising, Ireland's had you couldn't go more than 2 kilometres from your house, which is a
Right.
lot more specific policy. I don't know if that was important. At least in government
I
guidance.
think the UK's policy. I think the UK's policy currently on that is you can drive to walk somewhere, as long as you walk longer than you drove.
Yeah.
Is the
Or
guidance
drive
from
on your way back as
the
well.
Yeah,
Um,
and all
which
of
I'm
our
not quite
stuff
sure how they're going to do this.
is stuff on exercise is all come from one interview with Michael Gove in one of these daily press briefings where he was just making up what is reasonable, going, an hour if you're walking, half an hour if you're cycling, no diving or canoeing. I don't know what about the last two, but
Yeah. So phase 2 is allowing up to 4 people from different households visiting each other's homes with social distancing.
Right. Visiting each other's homes with social distancing. That is.
Yeah. So
That
you're
is
allowed to visit each other's homes,
interesting.
but they keep at least meters from people they don't live with.
Right. Because I think this could easily just become really overcomplicated, and I don't see why anyone would stick to that. If you're in someone else's house, unless you really are kind of, I don't know, maybe you're at risk or something like that, it's just completely impractical. You can't expect an entire population to take those sort of suggestions seriously, I don't think.
Yeah. Also, they will allow. This is all in phase 2. They'll also allow smaller retail outlets and libraries to reopen. So
Right.
starting to properly get into things that actually are communal as well.
Yeah.
Libraries are at the very heart, communal. So they really they're going to start trusting people to handle objects, then give them back.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
If you have coronavirus and you need to self-isolate, get a bunch of library books and then keep yourself occupied that way. What's to stop someone doing that?
Yeah, true.
In that regard. Phase 3, they're hoping to start on the 29th of June. So we are getting quite a lot in the future now. So this is when they're saying major ramp up of recreation activities and work, but still with strict social distancing.
Right.
Sporting events will resume behind closed doors, and cafes and restaurants reopening as well as playgrounds.
Okay.
People can return to work if they do not come into regular contact with others.
Right.
Clothes shops and other retail outlets will also be allowed to reopen, providing they have street level entrances and are not in malls.
Okay. Street level. I'm not sure what's so special about having a street level entrance.
I think it's to do with like queuing and stuff, that if you needed to get out in an emergency whilst maintaining social distancing, it's a lot
Okay.
easier if you're not at the, like if you're trying to queue or not come into contact with people going up staircases, that's a lot harder than if you can see them and you're queuing down a sidewalk.
Most staircases
That's a
don't
fair
allow
point.
50 meters.
True. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then we move on to phase 4 of the 20th of July. Once again,
Right.
just want to say this is Ireland, not the UK.
Yeah.
Kind of want to re-emphasize that. That's when people will be allowed to travel up to 12 miles.
That's not a massive distance.
It isn't, is it? Like that's nowhere really.
Yeah, it really is.
An hour of travel. That's about 15 minutes. But as we have said before, Ireland has had a stricter lockdown than us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Family and close friends will be able to attend small social gatherings, including weddings and baptisms. And museums, galleries, and churches will be allowed to reopen.
Right.
And then finally, their phase 5, being the 10th of August. So this is now in the middle of summer. Starting to get only a month away from going back to schools. Is when schools and universities will begin to reopen. Large social gatherings will still be allowed with social distancing.
Right.
And then, but that may be they're going to cut the summer holidays short and actually send kids back to school in the middle of it, by the looks of it.
No, they're
Interesting.
saying again, schools and universities will reopen at the beginning of the 2020-2021 academic year, so September.
Yeah.
So that's one of the key things for well, maybe not for, well, yes, probably for you, but for me as mainly is when are schools going back? As
Yeah.
that's the big one. Is this sometime in June, or should we just accept it's September and tell schools that and tell students that? But we're working on the basis it's September, not
Yeah.
is our work home arrangements short term or is this more long term, and we can take time to establish them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's also interesting. I did a poll on Instagram the other day. So obviously not very not rigorously checked, and not a control group or anything like that. But people all about our age. I put the question to them: should lockdown be lifted with social distancing in place? What do you guys think the results are?
Like 90% yes. I want to go sunbathe and meet all my friends.
I think
Okay,
I'd
90%.
probably agree because I think I don't know what the other options are. I think lockdown needs to be lifted, but social distancing needs to be maintained.
How many people do you reckon say that? As a percentage?
I reckon 80 or 90, like Ryan said. Yeah, I'd go something like that.
My results, I mean, bear in mind this is skewed, but I just found it interesting. 40% say yes, 60% say no.
Wow.
People are better than I expected.
I think government are finding this problem. Like I think there's been quite a lot in the media about how they've almost it is going to be difficult to get people to go back out again and to kind of return to normal.
Yeah,
I think people are also kind of forgetting that we didn't have lockdown before, and that was just social distancing.
Possibly.
Because I think people are kind of going, there's going to be an immediate second spike, but that isn't what actually probably will be happening.
The interesting though is the change in advertising. As I was on Facebook as you are, and I got a 2-minute government long video advert explaining what an R value was in terms of the rate of infection and about how we have to keep R below 1, otherwise there'd be exponential growth, obviously, which was a lot more complicated than just saying stay at home, save lives, save the NHS. But if the only way they're going to get people to go outside is
protect the NHS, save lives. Actually, you got the order wrong.
is to teach them maths and like about epidemics and epidemiology. It's quite a challenge. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's. I think it's difficult to get a balance in a way because you obviously need to have the public needs to have some awareness of the detail, but I don't think it particularly helps when government officials, at least in the evening press conferences, like to simplify things and like to kind of brush over the finer aspects of things. Perhaps not as much as they did with Brexit, but I think enough to kind of disqualify the idea that they are really bothered about everyone being super concerned about the detail.
Yeah.
It's not frozen again, Alfie.
I think he's frozen.
I think mine has, yeah. Hopefully it'll come back in a second.
I don't know what's happening anymore. Yeah. I was going to say something to do with this. And the potential easing of lockdown. That was it. What about devolving lockdown to counties? So allowing specific areas to lift. So somewhere like, so the Southwest has very few cases. Should we be allowed to come out of lockdown before places like London?
No, because everyone would come on holiday down to the Southwest. I think
that's what I think as well.
And it would ruin them. Yeah, from a scientific, everyone behaves perfectly and follows the rules, you could loosen the restrictions earlier and by region, by age, by all kinds of things. The real world, you need consistent message. So,
Yeah.
what about by country? I might support like Northern Ireland having their health decisions made with Ireland rather than with us, because they're on the island of Ireland and have very little physical links with the UK, the rest of Great Britain. Hopefully, I haven't just started a war. If anyone Irish, Northern Irish, or calls themselves British but lives on the north of Ireland.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Italy
That's
had
a whole other
similar problem.
Let's not get.
Yeah, definitely. Oh no, I think Italy had a similar problem when they were introducing lockdown. In that, I think one of their regions said they were going to introduce lockdown, and it was confidential, but it got leaked from a meeting a couple of days before it was going to happen, and then everyone left the region which was going to go into lockdown and moved elsewhere, which then meant there was a peak of cases somewhere else. So I think consistency, at least nationally, is quite important. But then when you look at America and big places like that, it's a completely different approach. So maybe it's different from country to country as to what works and what doesn't.
But then, isn't that also for when they're easing measures? Won't you have the same? As soon as they announce in 3 weeks you can see your friends, people will go next week and see their friends. Should they? I know it means businesses can't prepare, but it's an interesting question that should they just wait until it's totally safe and then go have an announcement and go at 9 a.m., 9 p.m. and say, from tomorrow you'll be able to see your friends. Go.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how people react to it.
Yeah.
I just got a notification to say that Boris Johnson has said that lockdown will definitely start easing on Monday. So that is quite a few days ahead of. Yeah. So that is a good, 3 or 4 days before it's due to happen. So I think the timing will be interesting when announcements are given ahead of schedule, or there's a few days of warning. Is everyone just going to then skip the wait and get going straight away?
Some of the word easing though as well there, I think. We're all talking about easing lockdown, but so many people are also going, don't ease it. They're confusing easing and lifting.
Yeah.
True.
I think that is.
You'll be allowed to go
a lot of people are going.
You'll be allowed
you can go 2 walks a day.
1 in the morning, 1 in the evening. Wow.
Or 1 really long exercise.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we might move over to the social bubble system, as I think the new buzzword is. But we also then might not. If I was them and I did that, I'd say, okay, you can do it, but and this is if you have the app. If you don't have the app, you're not allowed to do it. And then you have to self-isolate for a week. So you can see 1 group of people once a week. Because, I mean, I'm not saying this is what's there, and this is kind of just pure speculation, but I think that would work quite well. Because then, if anyone there is infected, that then gives everyone else a chance to then notice they have symptoms.
Yeah. I think that is more logical than the bubbling system as they've talked about it in Scotland. Or wherever they've talked about it.
Send that into the government. You're allowed 1 social interaction a week.
And if they really want to push the app, say you have to have the app, otherwise you're not allowed.
Yeah.
Because I think to a passport and something like that.
Yeah. I think you could have less limits on the numbers then as well. If there's a gap between where if you notice symptoms, then that whole group can isolate, you can isolate, and it's stopped straight away. And it just, I think, reduces the complexity or how complicated it is to have any kind of numbered system or socially distanced socializing or any of that sort of stuff.
I still think you could do the social distance. I still think social distancing would have to continue.
Right.
Yeah, because I think it would be improved, and I think that you can't guarantee everyone will be honest.
Yeah, true.
So I still need social distancing because you also don't know. They might go, oh, I really need this. I'll leave my phone at home so it looks like I'm isolating. I'll go grab a snack and then I'll come back.
When
As I think,
should we-
I'm not saying many people will do, but I think enough might.
an interesting, quick hypothetical for you. When do you think you're next going to hug someone that you don't live with? Are you thinking
I think that was
2025?
Jen, yeah. Also, once again, our loyal commenter has liked this idea as well of the of our new system of this is how we're planning to ease lockdown. Of the
Nice.
one social a week. So he said, "Great logic. This is why you lot have my vote." So come on, power of dialogue, political party, vote for us.
Sorted. Nailed it.
Might get a bit messy in some of the policy meetings, but it will all take place. But I think we are going to have to call it there, otherwise we're going to start overrunning massively.
Cool.
Thank you guys for joining me. Hopefully we have George back next week.
Yeah.
He seems to have, he's had a few reasons to kind of miss the last few ones, but we're hoping to see him again. When he does come back, we do want to be talking about the Labour investigation into report, which will be very interesting, I think, to talk about. And we have to have our resident left-wing representative to be talking about that, and registered Labour Party member.
Yeah.
So thank you once again to our many thousands of viewers, as we're sure. Currently, my phone 2, but it's 2 more than that.
It's true.
So yeah, thank you, and we will see you next week, hopefully. Right.
Will
Cheers.
do.
Bye.